If you were called mature for your age, if adults trusted you with problems children were never supposed to carry, if you learned very early that your needs came last, this video might explain your entire personality. Here's what actually happened. Nobody told you that you were growing up too fast. They just kept handing you things. The emotional weight of a parent who couldn't carry their own. The responsibility of keeping the peace in a house that never had any. The quiet understanding that your needs came last. Not because anyone said so, but because the evidence was everywhere, and you handled it. You handled all of it. That's the part that makes this so hard to talk about, because from the outside it looked like maturity. It looked like capability. It looked like you were simply one of those people who had it together earlier than most. What it actually was, what psychology now has a name for, was a child doing the emotional labor of adults who should have known better. And here's what nobody tells you about that child. They didn't just survive it. They built an entire psychological operating system around it. A way of reading people, managing situations, erasing their own needs, performing competence, that worked perfectly for the environment they were in. The problem is that environment no longer exists, but the operating system is still running. These are the 7 signs that you were emotionally mature too early, and the specific ways that survival system is quietly sabotaging your life right now. Every other video will tell you that you grew up too fast. This one is going to show you exactly how that's still happening. Right now, today, in the choices you make and the ones you can't. Sign 1. You can handle everyone's crisis, but freeze at your own. When someone you love falls apart, something in you goes calm, clear, strategic. You know exactly what to say, what to do, how to hold the situation together without losing yourself. People have called you the strong one your entire life, and in those moments, they're right. But the moment the crisis is yours, the moment you are the one who needs help, something short circuits. You don't know how to ask. You don't know what you need. The system that works so efficiently for everyone else simply doesn't load when you are the one who needs saving. This isn't a character flaw, it's a design feature of how you were built. The competence you developed in childhood was built entirely in service of others. You learned to be capable specifically when your own needs were not the priority. Crisis management for you was always outward facing, so when the crisis turns inward, the software has no instructions. You built an emergency response system with one blind spot, yourself. You can save everyone, except you. Sign 2. You can read a room perfectly, but you can't enjoy being in it. You walk into a space and something in you shifts immediately. A quiet alertness. You register the tension in someone's posture before they've said a word. You notice the micro-expression that crosses a face in less than a second. You know who's upset, who's performing, who's about to cause a problem, before anyone else in the room has even looked up. Most people would call that a gift, and in certain situations it is. But here's what nobody talks about. You can't turn it off. While everyone else at the party is laughing and relaxing and simply being present, you are working, scanning, managing the emotional temperature of the room, monitoring for threats that probably aren't coming. You are on duty in every social situation, and you have been since you were a child. Psychologists call this hypervigilance. It develops in people who grew up in unpredictable environments where reading the room wasn't a social skill, it was a survival skill. Your brain was trained to monitor for danger because at some point, that monitoring kept you safe. The scanner never got deactivated. It just followed you into adulthood, into every room you've ever walked into since. You are the most perceptive person in the room. You're also the only one who never gets to just be there. Sign 3. You are only comfortable when you are useful. When you are helping, you feel secure. When you are needed, the relationship feels stable. When you are solving something, the day feels justified. But the moment there is nothing to fix, no one to support, nothing to manage, something uncomfortable moves in. A quiet restlessness, a feeling that you are failing at something you can't name, that you are taking up space you haven't earned. Rest for you doesn't feel like rest, it feels like falling behind. This happened because in childhood, your worth was tied to your function. You were not valued simply for existing. You were valued for what you provided. Emotional support, household stability, peacemaking, caretaking. Love was not unconditional. It was a response to your usefulness. So your nervous system learned the equation early. I am what I do. And if I am not doing, I am nothing. The cost of that equation is this. You attract people who need you, not people who know you. And you have spent years building relationships where you are necessary without ever being truly seen. Stop for a moment, because if you've recognized yourself in even 2 of those first 3 signs, the crisis management, the hypervigilance, the need to be useful, there's something important you need to understand before we go further. None of this is a personality trait. It is not who you are, it is what you learned. And there is a significant difference between those two things, because what was learned can be unlearned. What was built can be rebuilt. The remaining signs go deeper. They're the ones most people recognize last, because they're the ones that hurt the most to look at directly. But before we get there, here is what psychology actually calls what happened to you. Not growing up too fast. That phrase makes it sound like you simply skipped ahead on a timeline everyone else was following. What actually happened is different. Your emotional development didn't accelerate forward. It grew sideways, into dimensions of adult experience that children were never supposed to inhabit, while every other part of you stayed exactly where it should have been for your age. That's why adult life feels so strange. You arrived at emotional maturity decades early, but you arrived there alone, without the context, without the support, without the other development that should have come with it. You didn't grow up too fast, you grew up out of order, and the confusion you feel living inside an adult emotional system in a life that was supposed to belong to a child, that confusion has a name. Psychology calls it structural dissociation of developmental age, but there's a simpler way to say it. You became fluent in a language nobody taught you, and now you live in a world where almost nobody else speaks it. Sign 4. You became everyone's therapist, but never got one yourself. People come to you, they always have. You are the one they call when things fall apart, the one who listens without judgment, the one who somehow always knows what to say. You have held more pain that wasn't yours than most people will ever hold in a lifetime. But when it's your turn, when you are the one carrying something heavy, you go quiet. You tell yourself you don't want to burden anyone, that they can't handle what you've been through, that you are supposed to be the strong one, and the strong one doesn't get to need things. The truth is simpler and harder than that. You were assigned the role of emotional caretaker so early that it stopped being a role and became an identity. And identities are not easy to step out of. The idea of being the one who needs support instead of the one who provides it feels like a betrayal of who you are. So you hold everything, alone, surrounded by people who think they know you, none of whom actually do. You are the most supportive person in every room. And the loneliest. The caretaker module is still running. It just never learned to turn inward. Sign 5. You have no idea how to be bad at something. Childhood is supposed to be the safe space for failure. The developmental years where you try things, fall apart, embarrass yourself, try again, with adults around you to absorb the consequences and tell you it's fine. You didn't get that. You went from child to competent without a buffer zone. Incompetence in your household wasn't a learning stage. It was a liability. Someone didn't eat. Bills didn't get paid. Chaos erupted. So you learned to be capable immediately. Failure was never safe. So you stopped risking it. Now you won't start anything you can't already do well. The idea of being a beginner, of being visibly, publicly in the process of learning, feels not just uncomfortable but genuinely threatening. You'd rather not try than try badly. You'd rather say, I'll start when I'm ready, and never start than produce something that proves you are not as capable as you need to believe you are. You didn't get to be a beginner, so now beginning feels like dying. Sign 6. You apologize for existing. Sorry for bothering you. Sorry for bringing this up. Sorry for needing this. Sorry for being upset about it. You apologize for your needs. You apologize for your emotions. You minimize what you're going through before you've even finished describing it. You make yourself smaller in rooms where you have every right to take up space. This is not a personality trait. It is a survival response that calcified into habit. In childhood, your needs were an inconvenience. Your emotions were a burden on people who were already overwhelmed. You learned, not through any single moment but through 1,000 quiet ones, that taking up space meant causing problems, that needing things meant making life harder for the people around you, that the safest version of you was the smallest one. So you shrank, and you kept shrinking, until shrinking felt like consideration, and silence felt like strength, and disappearing felt like the kindest thing you could do for everyone around you. You are not too much. You were just taught to act like you were. The self-erasure protocol is still executing, every single day. Sign 7. You feel decades older than you actually are. Not physically, existentially. You're in your 20s or 30s, but you feel like you have been tired since you were 10. Your peers seem younger somehow, lighter, less burdened, more comfortable with uncertainty. And you can't always tell if you envy them or simply don't recognize yourself in them. You have heard the phrase old soul your entire life. People say it like it's a compliment. It isn't. It's a description of someone who aged faster than they should have, whose psychological development sprinted while their actual childhood moved at normal speed, who was handed adult weight before they had adult shoulders to carry it with. The gap between who you were supposed to be at 8 and who you had to be at 8 That gap doesn't close on its own. It follows you into every relationship, every room, every quiet moment where you should feel your age and instead feel ancient. You didn't get an old soul, you got an exhausted one. Here is what most people won't tell you about everything you just heard. These 7 signs are not simply descriptions of a difficult childhood. They are the blueprint of a psychological operating system, one you built between the ages of 6 and 14 because your environment required it. That system worked. It kept you functional. It kept people around you stable. It kept you safe in circumstances that were genuinely unsafe. But you are not 6 anymore, and the operating system has not been updated. The competence that protected you is now the cage that isolates you. The hypervigilance that kept you safe is now the thing that keeps you from being present. The self-erasure that made you useful is now the reason nobody truly knows you. You built every one of these patterns for a reason. They were not weaknesses, they were survival strategies, intelligent ones, the kind that only a child with an unusually perceptive mind could have constructed under that kind of pressure. But survival strategies make terrible life strategies. You learn to be needed instead of loved, to perform competence instead of admit struggle, to manage chaos instead of expect stability, to erase yourself instead of take up space, and those lessons are still running. Quietly, in the background, in every relationship, every moment of rest that doesn't feel like rest, every apology you didn't need to make. The work now is not to become more mature. You are already more mature than most people will ever be. The work is to learn to be young again, to need things, to fail safely, to let someone else hold the weight for once. Not because you can't hold it, you've proven you can, but because you were never supposed to hold it alone. Early emotional maturity isn't a superpower, it's a scar that looks like strength.